It's October, it's spooky season, and we all know what kind of books that makes us want to read. That's right, Bigfoot porn, right? No? Just me? Okay. Hello, and welcome to another installment of Plagued by Visions. Today, we're going to talk about erotica, and specifically, weird monster erotica, I guess known as monsterotica. That's a new thing that I learned recently. As you can see, I've got my trusty Bigfoot hand here, which is very in theme because indeed I read a work of fiction in which Bigfoot fucks a bunch of women. So let's unpack that. First of all, I wanted to approach this first of all by giving a shout out to Lydia from Typical Books. I know it seems weird, but I stumbled across one of her older videos in which she did a tag that was initially created by the booktube channel Bookish, which is another phenomenal booktube channel. So I will link both of those in the description along with this tag. I believe it's called the Sex in Books tag or something like that, and it's all about approaching those kinds of sensibilities and reservations that a lot of us might have when it comes to reading about sex on the printed page and the shortcomings of it, how it is best approached, what are the sort of more exploitative tastes of that, what is some kind of fashion that can make sex on the written word kind of more meaningful or insightful or eye-opening in some way. So a very interesting discussion, and it provided me a lot of insight as to how to approach this kind of discussion that I'm about to have with a more serious, nuanced, and most of all informed tone. So thank you to Bookish, thank you to Lydia. I'm gonna link both of those videos down below, and also I believe the first work that I'm going to review I heard about from Lydia, who said that another booktuber named Chapter Stacks covered some time ago. So that's where it all came from. So Lydia, this is all your fault. Let's go ahead and see where can we start. Erotica is not something that I am used to reading at all, believe it or not. But I gotta say, as I was reading it, I was surprised by how familiarized or even how easily I was able to sort of recognize or vibe with a lot of the narrative conceits, and also just the way that it is presented. And of course, sooner rather than later, I realized that that was because of my usual reading, focusing largely on horror. And I soon, of course, came to realize that horror and erotica greatly overlap. They sort of meet halfway a lot of the time. Of course, much more explicitly, as we know, a lot of horror, for better or usually for worse, tends to contain a lot of sexual subject matter, lots of sex scenes, and there's very conflicted feelings about why that is. Is it just exploitative? Is it just meant to be this sort of a salacious presentation in order to outrage and boost sales? All publicity is good publicity. If you outrage, if you really sort of push those boundaries, then people are going to buy it because they're going to be interested in what all the buzz is about. And certainly sex sells. That's a good way to sort of get some kind of notoriety around your written work. But also, just I think thematically, even in a sense philosophically, the two genres really converge at certain points. And I think it has to do with, if we look at horror tends to be a lot of the time about the body, and it also tends to be largely concerned with taboos and taboo breaking. And you will find, you mix those two, you either get a gore fest, or you get a fuck fest, or you get both. But I digress. I wanted to approach this in a serious way because I feel like the subject matter at hand does kind of warrant it. I mean, I will admit, full honesty, I read this works initially just because my 12-year-old brain was like, ha ha ha, penis, ha ha, vagina. They said the fuck word. But the more I read, the more I realized there is a lot of moving parts here. No pun intended. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to sort of process. And this video is a kind of therapy for me above all else. I was, I guess, surprised. I don't know if pleasantly, but I was definitely surprised by the things that I read and the kinds of thoughts that they provoked in me. So I guess let's just go ahead and try to make sense of what I've gone through. I guess Erotica, like I said, I haven't read much of it. I would imagine I have. I mean, there are certainly pieces of erotic horror, or things that would be called that I have read, pieces of horror literature that contain prominent and constant depictions of sexual acts. I mean, I have my stack of laymen right there, and that's a good way to sort of pinpoint how the two really sort of blur a lot of the time. Layman is somebody who sort of insists on including sexual subject matter in his work. A lot of the time it reads like a really cheesy, bad 80s porno with the script written by a 12-year-old. But I guess that is in its way a kind of erotica. Another point, when I was buddy reading The Big Head with Timmy, the great Timmy, Timmy made a comment that I guess is sort of relevant to what we're talking about here. And he said, if Edward Lee didn't write horror, he would make a killer living writing erotica. And it really does seem that way. I mean, there's just constant sex scenes, constant depictions of sexual violence, and just so prominent, kind of overwhelming at times, to be honest with you. But also a lot of transgressive fiction, of course, which I cover in this channel prominently as well. Transgressive fiction is about, transgressive thoughts, and transgression has everything to do with taboos, with daring to do things that no other people, no sane people, no normal people would dare do. And when you cross those boundaries, it gets into a level of transgression. And I will say, all of the erotica that I read for this video focused heavily on transgression and taboo breaking. And that's really, really interesting. And I guess I've read the Marquis de Sade. His work is considered to be erotica in some way. I mean, not in a way that, at least I hope, would be titillating to anybody reading it. But that's what I kind of came to learn with this experience, is that that's not necessarily a given for a lot of erotica. I mean, I don't doubt that there's people that would be turned on by reading about Bigfoot's dick, but I'm also saying you don't necessarily have to be in order to read. I mean, if you are, more power to you. But I feel like a lot of people approach these titles, I mean, just look at the outrageous titles that they have, and then, the outrageous premises and so forth. A lot of people might approach them ironically, or wanting to be amused, or simply out of curiosity, simply wanting to see, how are they going to go about handling this subject matter, with what sensibility. Is it going to be shocking? Is it going to be funny? And I find that, audience-wise, that kind of approach to the literature is very similar to the mindset a lot of people have while approaching horror. I mean, a lot of horror doesn't promise to be pleasurable, it doesn't promise to be illuminating or philosophically successful, but still there are other promises, perhaps outside of the scope of what the author intended or not, that people take into account when they pick up the titles. So lots of similarities. And like I said, with the Marquis de Sade, you can see that. I mean, his work is profusely erotic, but I don't think people pick it up to be sexually aroused. And same thing for other followers of his kind of libertine philosophy, like Georges Bataille, like J.G. Ballard. So those works I have read are heavily on the erotic side, but they are momentous or powerful or significant due to reasons outside of what you would deem, the sort of more simple-minded, straightforward purpose of pornography. And so I felt very similarly to the works that I read for this video. And yeah, lots of Freudian baggage that we can discuss in the comments. Of course, Freud had a lot to say about taboo, about sexuality, about how the two meet, about the idea of desire, about the idea of transgression, about the idea of repression and the need for a kind of release. And release, breaking free is another prominent theme that runs through the 4 titles I read for this video. So very interesting discussion in my opinion. I'm not being sarcastic. I do think it's a fascinating subject, especially because this area of literature is so new to me, so unexplored, and up to now, I gotta say, so misunderstood by me. Like I said, to me, erotica always rang with this premise of just being, like, it's a very straightforward, one-dimensional pornography, but there's a lot. There's a lot going on here. So I guess let's just go ahead and get into that. So the first work that I read is Come for Bigfoot. And I'm sorry to say I don't remember any of the authors' names, but of course I'm going to put the covers up here with the name. So Come for Bigfoot, I have to say, one of the most disturbing books that I have read in recent memory, and I am not being funny. I am not kidding. I legitimately believe that. Come for Bigfoot is about this group of teenage girls who go out camping with a bunch of teenage boys, and there's all kinds of these juvenile sort of musings about who are they gonna fuck and who are they gonna sleep with, and our main character, who I hope was 18, but something tells me she wasn't, and that is another big issue that I had with a lot of this erotica. But anyway, our main character is not content with having sex with one of the boys her age who are camping along with them. She wants to sleep with the scoutmaster, the big head, and she eventually does, and there's this just extensive, of course extremely graphic sex scene between her and the scoutmaster. I don't even know if he was scoutmaster, just the adult of the group, which does lead me to believe that these characters are all underage, which is... So anyway, after that, they go hiking the next day, and our main character and her 2 other female friends are kidnapped by this old woman. It's never really established what this old woman's relationship is to Bigfoot, but I do have to say that Come for Bigfoot is like a 20-something part series. I don't know if I'm going to read the rest, but I just read the first one, so there's not a lot of lore explored in this one installment. But anyway, she kidnaps women because she, I believe, is the mother or adoptive mother, something like that, some kind of relationship like that she has with Bigfoot, and she kidnaps women so that Bigfoot can have his way with them, and he does indeed do that quite a few times. There are extensive passages describing Bigfoot's genitalia, and extensive passages describing the things that he does to these girls, and then it's just that, and then it ends. Granted, it's not a long book. It was like 20-something pages. It's hard. It's more like a short story, but it was still exhausting, extremely exhausting, and just I felt drained after reading it. I felt like I got fucked by Bigfoot. Unbelievably, repetitive, and that is another issue that I had with erotica. So repetitive, one trick pony in a way. But I'm sure there's better written erotica out there, but the one that I read, it was just the same thing over and over, driving the same point home. Bigfoot has a huge dick. Like, I get it. Is that it? Yes, it was. Eventually, the girls break free, but I'm not gonna spoil. Like, are they successful in escaping the clutches of Bigfoot, or will they forever be a victim of his sex dungeon? Read it if you want to find out. Reading this title, I felt a mix of emotions, primarily disgust. I have to be honest. I'm giving honest reviews. I'm being honest with myself and with my audience. I felt pretty disgusted. I feel pretty grossed out reading this. And I think that is, a mixture of reasons. I did not need to know how veiny Bigfoot's dick is. That is something I could have done without. And also, I did not need to know how much semen he pumps out. But that's besides the point, right? Well, the thing I gotta say, I go back to the point I made when I started talking about this title, is that this was extremely disturbing to me, and I'm finding that a lot of these were, and I was kind of wondering why that was. I was wondering, why was I so disturbed? I mean, I've read, what I've read. I've read transgressive fiction up the ass. I've read horror fiction of all kinds, and yet Come for Bigfoot, for some reason, was the title that finally broke me. The one that finally made me go, this is not okay. but then, learning more about the history of the series, I kind of had a newfound appreciation, quote unquote, for it. The author is I believe, a housewife who started making a successful living selling these titles. Which is why it spans so many multiple installments. I believe she initially, wrote it as a joke, so she is not someone who is aroused by the stories that she tells. I believe she wanted it to be outrageous as a kind of selling point, a marketing ploy. I mean, what's the most outrageous kind of erotica you can write? Bigfoot erotica, at least at the time. Now we have a lot more to choose from, which is, again, another great parallel to horror. I think a lot of the more splatter punk-ish sort of titles are birthed in that kind of thought process. What's the most outrageous premise that we can come up with? What's the furthest we can push the envelope? What's the most depraved stuff that we can put on the page? Depravity is another big thing, prominently displayed in horror and erotica. Now, besides that, I was also disturbed, I think, because this is the first straightforward erotica title that I have read, and so I find that I tend to be more disturbed by literature in which I am unfamiliar with the territory. And definitely when it comes to erotica, when it comes to a lot of its conventions, the way it approaches, the talk of sex, the way it is structured, it's highly new to me. Usually when I read horror, I can tell the kind of parameters that it is working within just because I've read so much of it. And I am used to, sort of picking up on the cues of what the author might try to throw at me next. With the exception of a few titles that have still surprised me. I enjoy horror, but I am hardly ever absolutely shocked or scared by it. I'm not really even scared by it at this point, just due to being desensitized. But for erotica, I really did not know what to expect, and that made it a harrowing ride, because I thought, okay, well, we already have Bigfoot fucking a bunch of underage girls. Like, what else is gonna come my way? And I felt really sort of nasty after reading. Like I said, the focus on it being underage girls and Bigfoot. I mean, Bigfoot doesn't have an age, but I don't know, man. What what do you want me to say? It was weird. It was gross. I did not like it, but like I said, I was fascinated by a lot of these thematic threads that it sort of opened up, and I was fascinated enough by just the existence of it. And I understand, that there's been so much outrageous stuff ever since. We're gonna cover some of that, but I just felt it was very strangely written, and again, the way that sex scenes sort of just jump out at you without warning really took me by surprise. If I'm being honest with the review, I try to be as honest as possible. I was not really sexually aroused by any of these titles, but I'm struggling to come up with an answer. Like, is that really even the point of a lot of erotica at this point, especially a lot of the type that I read? Like I said, I don't doubt / I don't judge if people are indeed aroused by Bigfoot dick. Like, go ahead, you do you. But I feel like that's not the reason why a lot of the readers pick up these titles. I think they're just more morbidly curious, as I was, and this is the first time that my morbid curiosity led me somewhere that I can honestly say I didn't want to go. Come for Bigfoot, coming for Most Disturbing Books Part 6. Stay tuned. I'm just kidding, but it would definitely belong there, and I feel like a lot of erotica would belong there again, because there's that obsession with taboo breaking, and it's so relentless, and often just so tasteless. It's so crass, it's so vulgar, it's so out there, that I really feel, if you are looking for things that push those boundaries, if you're looking for truly transgressive fiction, I don't know why I had never thought of this, but look towards erotica, because it is there. So yeah, I read that. I read Come for Bigfoot. And then the title that I read after that was Kissing the Coronavirus. Now this was a big thing back when the pandemic first started, obviously because of the outrageous nature of the premise. It's a woman literally fucking the coronavirus, a sort of a humanoid, muscly, well-endowed iteration of the coronavirus. Basically, it's this woman, she's a scientist who's working in a lab trying to come up with a cure for COVID. And she has a test tube with a coronavirus sample in it. And right off the bat, the test tube is a very phallic object, so she's kind of aroused by the shape, and she wants to do things to it. And I thought, okay, is this just going to be about a woman sticking a test tube full of COVID in her vagina? Because if so, that's genius. But no, it wasn't. Basically, her lab partner is this guy who has been infected by the coronavirus, who is dying from COVID and needs the cure ASAP. So he injects the prototype of the cure, but it kills him. But it makes his body mutate into a humanoid vessel from which this sentient version of the coronavirus emerges, extremely well-toned, very muscly, and well-endowed, like I said, and then they fuck. So what did I think of this? This was a lot more deliberate in its comedy. So I gotta say, I did enjoy this one, purely because of how deliberately humorous it was at certain points. I mean, some of the phrasing that it used to describe sex acts. I believe the main female character describes a penis as a man dog that she is, just yearning to have inside of her pussy buns. That's amazing. Lots of phrasing like that throughout. And lots of turns of phrase that are deliberately, purposefully humorous. So I enjoyed some of that, but I also find it kind of conflicted. It's this idea that maybe badly written erotica is funnier when you are under that notion that the author is unaware of how ridiculous it is. Lack of self-awareness is the birth of a lot of great comedy. But this one was, very self-aware of what it was doing. I mean, it was kissing the coronavirus. You cannot not be aware at that point. But like I said, it was kind of enjoyable. It was kind of funny. I did laugh a couple of times. But the sex scene, there is one sex scene in it between, of course, the female scientist and this human embodiment of the coronavirus. And I don't remember anything. I think I blocked it out of my memory. But that was definitely not the centerpiece of it. I believe that the fluff before and after is where the comedic kicks sort of roll in most prominently. So I gave that one 2 stars. It's the only one that I rated with a star rating. The rest, I don't think I could. But Kissing the Corona, I was 2 stars. I laughed a couple of times, and I think that's what it set out to do. So it was successful in that regard. So yeah, thumbs up. And then after that, I read Ravaged by the Tentacled Deity. And this one was pretty awful. But I gotta say, again, lots of really interesting thematic threads that sort of sprouted from it. It is about a woman who is traveling, outer space on a mission. I'm not even sure what, I already forgot, but she lands on this planet which is inhabited solely by women who seem to be part of this very primitive tribe. Who they have regressed in their speech and in their sort of culture. It's very bare bones sort of society. And soon she learns that this is due to the fact that they all pray to this giant tentacled deity that provides unimaginable sexual pleasure to them by simply touching them. I think one of the female characters, well, it's all a female cast. One of them gets touched by this tentacled deity, and she instantly has like 20 orgasms. So it's very even kind of like tastes of Clive Barker in there. That horrific sensory overload and whatnot. But then we find out that there's instant pregnancy involved. That's one of the selling points, by the way. If you read the cover, it says like instant pregnancy, which is apparently a thing that readers of erotica like actually look for. Like they're Googling shit and they're like, it doesn't have instant pregnancy. So I don't know if that's gonna make me nut. Anyway, so she eventually gives in to her urges to try to see, because the whole thing is that she's never had an orgasm in her life, and then she experiences like 20,000 of them with this tentacle deity, and then she finds out that the reason why spoilers, I guess, she finds out that the reason why the civilization is so sort of lacking in technology or any kind of organization is because they're all just lost in the ecstasy that the tentacled deity provides for them. It impregnates them with these eggs that instantly grow inside of them, and then they birth them out. So it's like this weird sort of a demented cycle of like tentacle pleasure and then instant birth followed by more. It was really, really bizarre, and just I felt very uncomfortable. Now I gotta say, this is where a lot of more interesting thematic threads sort of surface, and one of them is this idea of like giving into urges, and then another one is that the prominence of femininity in these titles. Let's tackle that latter one first. So all of these titles that I read were written by female authors, and it's female authors imagining female characters sort of being raped a lot of the time, I gotta say, or like it's described as forced sex, which is rape, of course, but it's done in a kind of fashion that's meant to be pleasurable for the reader, and that really, really, really unsettled me, and I don't like that at all. and it was so strange. I mean, I know that there's this subculture of people who have this kink of like rape fantasy and all that. I don't understand it, but I mean, what can I comment on it? But there's just an overstated presence of that throughout these titles, and it's something that these authors fantasize about a lot and write about sort of obsessively. So I don't know what to make of that. Somebody could shed insight on that. It would be very appreciated. But of course, I feel like a lot of you probably already turned this video off by now, which is fine too. And like I said, there's this idea of like giving into urges that the female characters don't want to recognize, but know that they have, and that's another kind of weird undercurrent in this premise of like forced sex. I mean, it's kind of weirdly weird mentality that's really sort of perversely in tune with a lot of rape culture, where the female characters in these stories think along the lines of I didn't know I wanted it, but once I got it I realized I was wrong, and then I wanted more of it, of course referring to a sex act. And that's very strange, of course, highly problematic and controversial, but again, that's the nature of erotica. It seems to be controversial, to be transgressive and taboo breaking, and of course there's a lot of that kind of same twisted mentality that's in the undercurrents of a lot of horror, and it's what outrages a lot of people who read horror, because these authors dare think in ways that not many people would think, or dare speak out in ways that not many people would dare speak, and so on and so forth. Very, very strange, and I still don't really know what to make of it, but I can certainly say I was more than unsettled and uncomfortable. But I guess that's what Ravaged by the Tentacled Deity was about. and again, no rating for it, but a lot of thought-provoking subject matter that I hope, please, at least somebody talk about this with me. I need to work out a lot of emotions. This is Ravaged by the Tentacled Deity was the piece of literary work that made me go, you know what? Let's go back to therapy. Let's it's time to go back to that. There are a lot of demons we need to work out. Then the last work that I read for this cktober readathon or whatever it, was Ravaged by the Raptor, and this is dinosaur erotica, which is a very, very prominent subgenre of erotica that's saturated with titles. There's tons and tons to choose from. I believe I remember the author's name. It's Christy Sims, something like that, because she is one of the first. She was the OG dinosaur erotica gal up in this house. She sort of came up with the idea. I think, again, a lot of these come up as jokes. A lot of these just come up as, what's the most fucked up thing I can write about? So, Ravaged by the Raptor was excruciatingly boring Flintstones politics, and then she gets fucked by a raptor, and that was it. And I'm finding that a lot of these were that way. A lot of these, of course, were extremely short. I don't think I read a single one that was above 30 pages. And this one in particular, it's a velociraptor that sort of mounts her, and she, again, she doesn't know she wants it until she gets it, and then she's like, well, you know, never thought of fuck a velociraptor, but we're here, might as well make the most of it. It's very weird. as if that wasn't self-evident to you. A very strange sort of twisted mind at the other side of this. Again, like I'm telling you, with horror, I hardly have these thoughts anymore. I hardly think of any horror author as too sick, too deranged, too depraved. But with erotica, I'm starting to think it more and more. And that's where I'm like, well, is it just the one big joke? Like, is there really, like, the people that are actually aroused by stuff like this, like, is the joke on them? Or, I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I can say the sex scene with the velociraptor here was the most sensibly written sex scene out of all of these. And that kind of surprised me. I mean, there's a tenderness there. The two embrace, the two sort of understand each other. They form a kind of solidarity. And then it ends very tragically. I gotta say, I was I was kind of like, no, don't hurt the velociraptor. He just wanted to get laid. But I think at that point I was just losing my mind. So yeah, that one was, like I said, kind of boring and uneventful, except for the part. And I can't say I really enjoyed any of these to any capacity. But and so the conclusion that I reached after reading all of these was, would I be willing to read more of it? I think not for a while. I think I'm good right now where I am. But there's another interesting conversation that I came upon with Jesse from Bartell's Bookshelf, who does read this kind of work and is interested in something that's, you know, a lot more competently written, and is actually a very sort of critical of a lot of erotica, because a lot of it really doesn't deliver in the terms of emotion, or in terms of, you know, some kind of poignant, significant, or anything like that. And emotion is something that was lacking in most of these titles. Everything was very cold and frigid and just distant and weirdly told from a detached perspective, and that really didn't make it enjoyable. Now, another thing that bears mentioning is that all of this was straight erotic. I mean, I don't know if it can be called that. I mean, well, it was female women with male creatures, so I guess heterosexual interspecies stuff. I don't know. And you know, the thing, you know, me being a gay reader, I didn't read about kinds of sex that interest me. Would I feel different if I read gay monster erotica? I don't know. I honestly, my guess right now is probably not, just because the disturbing factor is more ingrained in the way that things are told, the way that things are approached. But again, like I was getting at with Jesse from Bartell's Bookshelf, is that he often runs into the same problems, because a lot of it, you know, is lacking in a kind of a human sensibility, and it's a constant struggle to try to find works that actually sensibly and realistically approach the subject matter of sex and sexual gratification, or in kind of sex as a conduit towards an emotional revelation or emotional significance, which is again the kind of conversation that was being had with Lydia's video on sex in books tag. So lots of things to think about, lots of things to process and consider. So like I was saying, would I read more of it? Maybe somewhere down the line, if I'm assured that it's going to be something that's better written and more, less disturbing. I never would have thought I would ask for something that's less disturbing, but here we are, and I feel very conflicted, and I feel very weird about the whole thing. But okay, let me know. And I don't know if this is too personal a question to ask, but I do want to say that I am very open-minded, and if any of you watching actually read and enjoy reading erotica, and if you are comfortable sharing that kind of information in the comments, please let me know. And I do want to have a serious conversation about this. Like I said, it is a very new literary landscape for me. I'm not used to reading it at all. I'm not really even sure how it's best approached, but I am willing to discuss, what it is that attracts you about it. Do you read it? I am convinced some people do read it for the story and the characterization. Like I said, those are things that would probably make it a better experience for me. So let me know, what do you look for in erotica? What's really sort of turns you off from erotica in one way or another? All things that I'm very, very interested in discussing. So yeah, this was a very strange video. One of a kind on this channel, but I did read this works, and I did need to get them out of my system, and so here we are. All right, I hope you're all well. Continue to stay safe, and if you go out in the woods, watch out, because Bigfoot might get you.